Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well today. And it's always helpful for me if somebody will pop in and say hi just to let me know you're there. And we'll get started. It's been quite a week here. Well, not exactly here. I was leading my retreat in Michigan this past week. It was wonderful. It was so good to see all the participants, to enjoy their company, lots of laughter, little shopping. It was all good. Um, Aloha, welcome. Sounds like you're in a fun place. Hello, hello, Janelle and Cheryl, Deb, Jackie, Joanne. It's been a great week, and we're just going to continue the fun here with this. So Mary and Barbara, good, good. Glad the sound is good at all. It's great, excellent. So got to catch up yesterday on playing with my little granddaughter. It was fun. To see her again. I missed her for my week. So anyway, today we are going to tackle a form of landscape quilt. It's something that I kind of threw together based on pictures, based on other things that other people had done, and then just kind of made up the rest on my own. So, but I can't help myself. I'm just going to put it that way. I cannot help myself. When I go to the quilt shows, there's always a booth of Sari Silk. And for whatever reason, I am attracted to it like a hummingbird to flower. They're so beautiful, and I love the feel of them and how they look. And I always snag at least one and thinking, I'll figure out what to do with it. And then I saw some beautiful work done on landscape quilting. I wish I could say I could do the kind of work that I saw and that inspired me to tackle this landscape with Sari Silk. But I'm going to give you a very basic outline of how I tackled this, how I do it, and then, as always with me, this is a starting point for you then to use your imagination, your creativity, and take it to the next level. And I know that many of you will, and I cannot wait to see your results. No matter whether you think they're wonderful or not, share them with us, because something you did may spark an idea with someone else, and we can play off each other's creativity, and that would be wonderful. So first, let me drop the camera and so you can see my table. And here is a very raw, this was my first attempt at using the Sari Silk. I left bits and pieces of this Sari Silk on here so that you could see it's this ribbon. Now I pressed it. I thought that was a better idea for this. And overall, I would say I like it better when it's pressed because I can manipulate and work with it a little bit better. So these pieces right here are this section right here. And so you can kind of see how they work in there. Now, you could do mountains, you could do ocean, pasture. I'm not sure what I did here. I think I was thinking beachy with all the grasses on it, because when I had done this, we had gone to a Northern California beach where you have, the water, the sand, and then some grasses, and then more sand, and then, whatever is beyond that, depending on which beach and where you go. So this particular one, I had taken and dyed fabric for this. And let me just share with you some highlights and some fabrics that both I've bought and both I've painted. So this one right here is a fabric that I did some work on. It was already slightly printed from, the maker of that, and I added to it. This one I purchased, and it's some sky, or it could be water with some sunset. I experimented with some ice dyeing at one point, and this is some of the sky that I did with ice dyeing when I wanted to get those evening hues in it. This is another piece that I ice dyed to get some of that look, either for water or for sky. So you can go digging. This is a little bit more. So just find those fabrics. They have them available. This is another purchased piece. So there's plenty. And then I stripped those and made strips out of them so that the whole thing would have some continuity. But I don't suppose you really would have to, because I know I've done, if I have a piece of cloth that works really, really well, I just leave it and have it a solid piece there and then work my way across. So anyway, that's the sample of a landscape or stripped Sari Silk quilt. Now, there's a couple of different things that I use. This is just simply batting. I put a backing on it so all of that doesn't stick to my presser feet on my machine. So you can start with just a piece of batting. Any of the interfacings. This is that really thick Pellon or Peltex, and I really like that too. That was what I had used for my sample, and when I know that I may want to frame it, I'll use this because it's a little bit more sturdy, if you will, to put into a frame. So I like this one for that reason. But if I'm going to face this or use it as a small art quilt, then the batting is just fine. And it's a great way for me to use up leftover batting. So we're going to get started, and I'm really just going to show you the method by which I tackle this. And if I'm going to do water, and let's say today that I'm going to. This is also, by the way, a very messy project. So I'm just going to pile up all my blues that I stripped for this purpose today, and some transition fabrics in there, and the silk phrase. So you're constantly picking off these little threads and getting rid of them. So anyway, so I'm going to start with my sky being a little bit on the darker side because I think it is in nature itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a start on this, and I'm going to sew, and I leave it hanging off the side so I can square it up and all that. I am simply going to sew one strip down the middle. Now I have done it both ways, and each way works just fine. That I will use thread that matches whatever I'm working with. So it's sky here. I might go with a light gray, a white, a light blue, something like that. But for today and the ease of changing it on the sewing machine, I am simply going to use Superior's invisible thread. So then I will take this first piece, I will put it under my machine, and I'm going to straighten it out more or less. And I am not worried about this seam being straight. All I'm doing is attaching it to the interface or the batting, and I'm just going to run that, and I had practiced with this over and over again so that I wouldn't have this issue, and here I have this issue that that something's not working quite right. So let me see if I can very quickly do that. So you know what you can do, especially if you bought some of the Sari silk from the store. Oh my gosh, that stuff was beautiful. I loved it. The ladies there at the shop did a fabulous job of picking out choices for you. There's so many things that you can do with Sari silk for embellishment that and I just want to say that when you have your light off on your machine and trying to thread the needle, that it's almost next to impossible to see. Let's see. Aha. I think I got it. All right. I can't talk and concentrate at the same time. Sorry for that. There's many things that you can do in terms of embellishment for the Sari silk rolls. So if you buy them and find out that you tried this and it wasn't your cup of tea, you're going to find so many things that you might embellish with on that. All right, let's see if this will work. And we're back on track now. All right. And so when you're sewing this is basically attaching it. And so if you're crooked, if you don't quite get it, that's okay. All of that is fine. There's no problem with any of that. All right. So now let's go back. So then the second piece that goes on, it gets is a little bit more interesting because what I want to do is that I'm going to pull this back a little bit and lay this next piece in so that when it's sewed down, those can mush together. All right. And I'm going to show you how I do that fairly quickly here too. So I've kind of overlapped that and mushed that in a little bit as I do that to get it in there nice and tight. So again, I'm just going to run my machine down the middle. And you will keep working your way. I don't know that I am going to sew the whole thing for you. But again, I would keep as much sky as I wanted to put in there, and I would keep sewing those pieces together like that. And I think that's probably getting close to what I want of sky in there. And so pushing that one in there, and then I'm gonna move down, and sorry, I didn't realize that wasn't in the camera all the way. And so then I'm gonna go into just a little bit of gray, just for giggles and kicks. And then this is something else that I will sometimes put in. This is a piece of gauzy fabric that I had left over from a baby quilt that I had done, and I may sew that in, and I may let it crinkle up so that I get some really nice texture in there. And then I'm going to start moving into that sight line if there was water, or at the And again, I'm going to keep trying to keep all of these little pieces of threads, so I get out my scissors or whatever, so that, because those will show up in the end result, and that's why I like to get rid of them. And then this one I did not iron. I just left it the way it is. And this one I may just sew right at the edge of this to give that some extra texture there at the horizon line. And because I think I'm gonna make that my horizon and let that be. And then I'm gonna start moving into possibly, some sand pieces. And again, this one isn't overly, and I'm going to tuck that under that piece, and I'm going to keep working different colors, because as we know, sand isn't always the same color. And every now and then I'll throw a piece of fabric that's not silk or that's not something else in there. And this one is just a sand color with some little spots in it, so I thought that would be great, and a nice transition piece in between these. So I keep working my way down, and then I'm going to start moving into some of these funky greens. And for fun, I'm going to throw in something that will give a little spark to this. And so when I fold that back and tuck this next one in, I'm going to get just a little bit of that bright green that is coming through on that. And that's just going to give a little bit of a spark to that. And then throwing in something like this that's going to, again, add some texture, because I did not iron that piece. And I'm going to just, keep moving along and then move into my browns. And I want to show you this. This is silk. But when you're here at the edge, these threads just pull right out of there, and you get this kind of an eyelash effect on the ends of this. And it's kind of wonderful, because when you sew that in and those little pieces pop up on there, you're going to get this wonderful extra added with the black that this was worked into, and they just pull off the edge, and you get these just fabulous. And even something like this works really well in there to add a little bit of texture, to give it a little extra. And then there's these ribbons that you can get that's also, it's basically an eyelash ribbon. You can either open it and sew it down the middle like that, and then you have kind of a double layer of the eyelash effect. And with that, it just adds another layer, is what I'm trying to say. I was reading to make sure that no one had questions, and if you've been with me for even a few days, you know that I can't chew gum and walk at the same time. So I got some eyelash effect. I've got all of that going. And then these beautiful teals can be added in there. And then I just find this one to be fascinating. That can be added into this. Now, this one I want to share with you, because it has been torn, or it's separated, and it's got the open weave in there. Now, two things: you can cut it, or you can sew along that and get this nice crunchy, that's what I call it, it looks crunchy to me, this crunchy stuff on either side. So if you sewed it down the middle and you added that at the end, you're going to get this wonderful fun, because that's going to flow over there, and you got all this wonderful texture, and that's without the ironing. And I iron mostly because I wanted you to be able to see the fabrics that I was using. Here's another one that's got that fabulous green in the center. So if you wanted to throw in just a touch of that fabulous green, you could, you know, throw that in. Once all of this is, you've got it the way you want it, and you've got all your pieces and parts in there, and you've picked from your pile of your Sari silks. And this is a very small piece, by the way. I didn't make it very big for the camera, because really I'm just teaching you the technique, because my hope is then that you'll take this and run with it and make this you know, these wonderful scenes and places, because you can do mountains and creeks and rivers, and go take a picture of a place you've been on vacation and, you know, transform it and cutting pieces across. And I just sew them down. And then what I do is, because this looks unfinished to me, and so I take a piece, and you can go black, you can go, you know, this is white. This is what I could find since I moved. I can't find things, but I found the white. So, and that's what I used on the other one. And I would cut a piece that fits over this. And what I do with this is I start and I push my pieces down, and I'm going to sew across the top of this, and I'm going to do that right now. Let me cut this off, because this is going to go rolling, and I'm going to have netting all over myself. So I'm going to just cut a piece of this off right now. All right, let me switch the camera. And again, I let this more or less hang off the top, but I want to secure this so that I can show you and share with you how this netting goes on and works for me. So I'm just sewing across, and however this, you know, folds out and lands is perfectly fine, because to me that gives this whole piece part of its charm, if you will, if you want to call it that. All right, then I'm going to bring this back, and so I have secured that on the top. So then I keep it under my machine, which I'm not doing right now, and then I flatten it, and I go in before I go down. And if there's some of these threads and stuff, because this is cotton, these threads really show up. The silk sometimes adds an element of niceness to it, but I'll go in, so that one didn't get sewn down, and I'll get rid of those threads. All right, and I don't always necessarily want the seam lines to show, so I might twist a fabric or something so those original seam lines really aren't showing. And then I bring this down, squashing everything in, laying it tight, and then I go the other direction, and then I go back, and I keep doing that until that gets nice and flat and tight in there with what I've done with my piece. And so as you work your way down, it starts taking a little bit of its own shape, and these would be sewn, so they're going to take the same shape as up here. They're going to overlap. They're going to move in different directions. You can manipulate some of that before you sew your netting over the top. And I really like that netting idea, and I could just use white until I got to the darker part and then switch to a black netting. The black gives it a little bit more rich color. If you're doing mostly green, use a green netting. You know, kind of play with it yourself and see what you might want to do with it. But as you work your way down and you're flattening that out, you get this wonderful you know, rich look to it that happens. And so that's what occurred here. And if I turn this over, a few pieces got caught on the bag. But you can see, hopefully you can see some of the stitch lines. I just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And as you can tell, I didn't pay attention to being straight or anything, because it's not necessary. You really don't see it, and especially when you use the clear thread. And I like Superiors. My machine likes it best of all, and it seems to work well for me. And I sew on a Bernina, so you might try the threads that work best for you in terms of the invisible thread. So this has been squished down, and you can see, you know, sometimes the sewing where it's gone across, how it's overlapped and shared, throwing just bits and pieces of bright in there so that it has a little bit more life, I think is very helpful. And again, this was my first go at it, and I keep it around as a sample. Done some other ones for family and different things, and love it, how it goes through. Now, here you have you have your background done. So what else could you do with this? If you're doing a beach scene, could you put a sailboat on it? If you're doing mountains, could some of them be white capped, and how would you put those on, and what would you use? And if you wanted to embellish it on the beach, could you sew in some seed beads? And I use a number of things that I want to share with you for embellishment and to get some of those ideas that I want. This was in okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. This was in a trash can at a fiber fair that I attended when I lived in Michigan. And I walked by and I saw it and I thought, oh, that's really pretty. And so I took it out of the trash can. And the trash was clean. It was all fibers. And so just so you know, that it wasn't gross or anything. But I will pull some of this wool out of here. I love this because I can put that into an ocean scene and get some of the most wonderful waves, and that time again. And that's just awesome. And so that's a possibility for you. Those pieces of wool. And then again, sometimes when I'm at those shows, these wonderful things, if there's a color that I know that I use a lot of, I will buy, their little packages of all these wonderful pieces. And so again, I can use stuff like this for ocean waves, for capping a snow-capped mountain. I can use them for embellishment to add texture, whatever, in there across my piece. And part of me says, gosh, I could just take a chunk of this, squish it down, and look how fabulous even that would be if I chose to do something as wild and crazy as that is. But running that across. Seed beads are always a good option, and so are, a little bit larger shells, buttons, anything, found objects that you have, old pieces of jewelry that you might use some E6000 or a glue like that and glue it down to the piece if it fits into your sight line. Here's a little art note for you. If your sky is a bright blue and you are using mountains and are going to put a lake in, remember that the lake usually reflects the sky. So you probably want to use initially the same fabric in your water as you do in your sky, because it's a reflection of that. And most horizon lines are very straight across on the horizon. So to keep those two things in mind as you're doing stuff like this. And again, Here's another thought. You can get this organza ribbon, and if you put a little bit of organza ribbon into your sky, you're going to get a little bit of that wonderful sparkle in there. So if you added that in, and I can tell you, it's just wonderful to have when you move in the light or whatever, to have that little bit of sparkle in there. So some organza. These colored ribbons that you can get, or you can dye them yourself. It's that seam binding stuff that you can pick up, adding that in there so you get different color across. And in a sky, evening sky that you want to, that wonderful colors that happen in the sky at night when the sun goes down, or early in the morning when the sun comes up. There's just this, these wonderful textures you can put in there to get a beautiful sunset with. And then, crazy threads like this running through, if there's something, with grass or sand or weeds, or cut them in little pieces like this, and you get wonderful little grasses and things like that from stuff like this. And then I will oftentimes throw a little piece of lace down at the bottom. Not a lot. I might just add a little bit of lace in to give, again, I'm looking for that texture. That's maybe where I'll put an object or a button or something like that. So there's different kinds of, the lace for that. Whatever you can, kind of come up with and find. Adding this would help in the ocean waves. If you scrunched it together and had that coming out onto a beach scene, you can see how you might work your way down. And I see that there's a question, do you continue to sew each piece down after you sew the first one down? Yes, I do. I just didn't take the time on camera to sew all of them down. But every piece gets sewn. It gets tucked up close to the first one. So let me go back to the top. And again, I sewed that first one down. And then I tucked the next one a little bit under that, sewed the second one down, and I would keep doing that all the way down. So every piece has been sewn completely across that before I do anything else. Once I'm done sewing every piece in the order that I want it to go, then I will go back and I will start sewing back and forth across my netting that I put down to get it nice and flat. So good question again. And then I just simply sew back and forth to get that netting to kind of meld in with all of my fabrics. So no, these are not loose to begin with. Every single strip that goes across has been sewn all the way across. I just didn't take the time on camera to do that. So great question. Let me just see if there's any other questions here. Somebody said, I missed something. What are you creating? It's just a little landscape piece, a fun little piece that you can work with. So that's what I'm doing there. All right, I think that's, there you go. I think that's the questions I see right now. And there are other people that do forms of this. This is what I've taken from watching others do things, taking some tutorials, some classes. This is not by any means as beautiful as most people's work out there, but this is a starting place for you to jump off and start creating some of your own and finding your own voice. Artists talk a lot about what's your voice, who are you, what kind of art are you going to do. So, when there's a Monet, you can absolutely tell it's a Monet. because you have a certain style, you have a certain way of doing things. And I've been working at this well over 50 years, and I don't think I've heard my voice yet, because I keep trying things and keep changing. Or maybe that's a disease or something that I have, that ADD or ADHD, one of those, where I can't settle on one thing. So this is a starting point. This is to give you an idea. Here's another way to do something. And go to your stash and strip it up, create something of your own. And then these leftover little pieces and stuff, I've been known to cut them into little tiny chunks and squares, and then work on creating confetti quilts. Where I take a picture that I've taken, or someone else who's given me permission to use that picture, and I've created it again with little chunks of fabric, and it's called confetti quilting, and it's very wonderful too. But this was, how do I use up this Sari silk that I keep purchasing, and these chunks of fiber that I have left over from something else. And this is just the trash of carding wool that has been dyed. But these little pieces and stuff that I can throw in to a confetti picture or something like this just adds such incredible depth and volume. So one that I did for a friend. I use some of this and that for a night. She loves the ocean at night, and a boat tossing on water at night, and those little pieces were the light of the moon coming through. So it's a different way to look at things. It's a different way, and this side is far lighter than this side. So you play, and I collect things like this from time to time. I don't have a ton of it, but I have some pieces, and I cherish the stuff that I have, and it's fun and it's wonderful. So here's an idea for you. Give it a shot. Have fun when you're embellishing. You can embellish with seed beads, buttons, found objects, old jewelry. All the yarns and the threads that are out there are so fabulous. Here in Northern California, Pacific International Quilt Festival is coming up this next weekend, and it's amazing if you look into the nooks and crannies of those little booths, what you might find in there, and start looking at things with a different perspective. Sometimes, for me, I like them for reasons that they aren't in the booth for or made for. They're for something else. But just let your imagination be a little bit free and go for it. So Sari Silk Landscapes, again, whatever your imagination can find. Today was about giving you another possibility, another way to tackle this, and now what can you do with it? And I really do hope that some of you will give it a shot and start out small. It doesn't have to be very big, just so you get the technique down, and then change it up, make it your own. And please add those to the forum, because I know I would love to see any of it. Whether you think it's good or not, put it up there, because we can glean from your experiments as much as you'll glean from all of the rest of us, and use those little things that you have. And Sari Silk is just so wonderful, and I can tell you that those that are in the shop on the quilt show are just wonderful. And I know that I'm going to probably be purchasing one, even though I do not need it. It's just so pretty. So you guys have a wonderful week. Next weekend, I have a commitment that has been on the books for a long time. So I will not be here next week. So you got 2 weeks to play. And then I will be back the following week, the following Saturday. Sorry, this October was just kind of busy for me, and but it's all good. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Have a wonderful, wonderful couple of weeks, and I'll see you then. Bye.